Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where men are forged, not coddled. Here we dive deep into the path of true transformation in pursuit of physical, mental, spiritual, and temporal growth. We talk training, nutrition, business, mindset, and spirituality. We embrace strength and we loathe ease. We reject weakness in every form and cultivate power, the will to power itself. This is the rebirth of modern man. Raw masculinity, tempered by reason, virtue, and right action, because nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. Let's begin our apotheosis together. Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where warriors are forged, not pamper. This isn't really just about fitness. This is about transformation. Physical, mental, spiritual, and financial. These episodes, we're going to talk about suffering and how to rise, how to win at life through embracing struggle. So this first episode is going to be kind of a breakdown of a little bit more about the podcast, a little bit more about me and my idea behind it and why I want to do this, why I want to provide this value to you guys out there, and hope that I can find people that are interested in some of these similar concepts that have helped me so much on my own path to growth through adversity, hence the name of this podcast. So why this podcast exists is because I believe that struggle is the price of greatness. I think that this is something that too many people overlook, that you cannot have, that anything worth attaining is going to require sacrifice and struggle. So this podcast is about reaching the people that are ready to pay that price. You'll never become powerful. You'll never become respected. And you'll never become fulfilled in life by avoiding pain, which is like the essence of modernity. Everything in modernity is ease and comfort, the easiest path, the quickest path, and none of it has any value. None of it has any true meaning or value, and I believe that it takes away from the individual to not be willing to embrace suffering to grow, because those are the moments where you look back and you're actually proud of yourself and you're actually fulfilled in what you've done. Anything given for free or given easily doesn't really have any value to you. So here we embrace pain. Actually, we alchemize it. We turn it into strength, and we actually seek it out, I believe, is necessary. You have to be willing to not just accept pain as it comes, but really to seek it out and to seek out these initiations and these ordeals and be willing to struggle so that you can grow. And you're here right now because you know that you're meant for more. Maybe you've been soft. Maybe you've been distracted. Maybe you're addicted to comfort. Whatever it might be, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story next, because it's never too late for you to turn shit around and totally just rebuild and transform your fucking life. The human ability to transform and change, it's so mutable and it's so powerful and it's so poignant that it's something that you should never, ever give up on yourself, because who you are today has zero reflection of who you're going to be in 10 years or 5 years, unless you choose to just stagnate and not pursue that best version of yourself. So my story is fucking crazy, right? So at 20 in my let's go back before that. So as a kid, I was always in fucking trouble. I did not want to conform. I never felt like I identified with cultural norms. I never felt like I identified with societal norms. I always felt like a fucking outlier. I always felt like a fucking outcast. So I did what most fucking stupid kids do, and I rebelled against it, right? And it got me in a lot of trouble. And slowly that process snowballed, and it got me into some pretty dark places. And by the time I was in my late teens, I was hopelessly lost. I was addicted to meth. I was basically living hotel room to hotel room, selling dope to survive, and to keep getting high. Everywhere I went, I had a gun. It was just like I was living the epitome of the life that you don't want your kids to live, right? And that was my existence for about 4 years. And I cut off all my family. I lost touch with everybody. I sank into my own black pit of despair and misery, and was just like, so, and the thing about addicts and when you're caught in that cycle of addiction is you are like so inherently and pathetically selfish. And that is, and we're going to talk about that a little bit deeper as we go through this, because I believe that's one of the pillars of masculinity, is that you're a protector and a provider. And when you're an addict and you're in a situation like that, you're the antithesis of that, because you are just caught in a cycle of selfish indulgence, right? So I was broken. I was angry. I was lost. At 21 years old, it kind of all culminated. I ended up in a situation where I went to go buy some dope from a guy. He ripped off one of my associates at the time. And so I went and confronted him about it. And when I confronted him about it, he pulled the gun. He shot me a couple of times. I had a gun. I shot him. He ended up dying. And I went through the process. I was arrested, obviously, and charged with murder. And in the process, my case got pled down to a manslaughter, because it was basically self-defense, but the judge is rational and logic, and I actually agree with him at this stage. Who was one of the things he said in my sentencing was that it's not, we don't live in Dodge City, like, you know what I mean? This isn't fucking Dodge City in the 1860s. If you have a problem with somebody, you can't go over to their house armed and confront them looking for a confrontation, and then when you get it, kill them. Like, that's not the world that we live in. We live in a civilized nation. We live in a nation of laws and rules and order. And I agree with him, and I believe he was right, because that was basically it. I didn't think it was going to escalate to the point that, well, I really didn't think anything. I was fucking caught in a cycle of drugs and fucking delusion and not sleeping and the whole thing. So, you don't really like rationalize and logically think things through like that. But I never in a million years thought that it would turn into a fatal situation when I went over there. But now looking back on it, well, that's what happens, because the guy that, he was just as caught in bad in drugs, and he was just as fucking psychotic and delusional. And so we were on a path where, and I believe it was fate. One of us was meant to die that day, and the other one was meant to undergo an initiation in a process that would ultimately lead to growth. But either way, like I said, so this whole thing happened, and I ended up getting knocked down from murder to manslaughter. So rather than serving a life sentence, I was given a 19-year sentence, which on that you ended up serving about a little over a decade. So I went to prison, and when I went to prison, I basically just continued the same shit that I'd always done. Drugs are ubiquitous in prison. Prison culture is toxic as fuck. It revolves around drugs and drug addicts and violence, and it is a feedback loop in and of itself. And for my first 5 years in prison, at least my first 4 years for sure, I was caught in that cycle completely. It was just like, and that's what happens is guys go in as young kids and, that are like lost, but maybe still salvageable. But drug culture and prison culture is just so toxic and so fucking dark that they get caught in the loop in there. And then it gets to a point where they're like irredeemable, and you get caught in this cycle of in and out, in and out, in and out. I watched it. My time was long enough that I was consistent there, that I would see some guys multiple fucking times a year, definitely multiple 5, 6, 7 times throughout my sentence, in and out, in and out. And that was going to be me. Like, that was ultimately where I was at in the beginning of my prison sentence. Was I was just fucking lost, and I was continuing to do drugs, and I was continuing to do all the things that had gotten me fucked off. And I remember, still to this day, I remember the very moment. It was an instant in time, and I was like, I felt hopeless. My relationship at the time with the woman I loved was falling apart, because I was doing 10 years in prison, and we were both too young for that to make even be something that felt like there was an end to it. You know what I mean? So that was falling apart and decaying. I was losing touch with my family. I felt like I didn't know who I was. I felt like my life was hopeless, like I would never get out. And I had this instant where one of the fucking cops in there, this fat little fucking troglodyte creep motherfucker, I ended up asking him a question, and he was just like a total fucking dick. And I lost my temper and fucking basically like kicked this fucking bucket full of spray bottles, and it scared him, right? So, and it was just kind of like a petulant child's temper tantrum, but it scared him, and so he fucking called in the goon squad, and they locked me down, right? And they locked me in the cell, and I remember I was pacing back and forth that night in that cell, and it was the middle of winter. It was dark outside, a little bit of, you could see a mountains out back a little bit, but it was dark. You could see the snow on them, the reflection, and I'm pacing back and forth in the cell, and I'm just like at a point where I don't know what to do, where to turn. And I remember I had this razor blade, and I popped it open, and I was just legitimately, probably for the only time in my life, considering ending my life. I really was looking at my wrist, and I was thinking about goring myself and just ending it. And then something happened, man. And I had a spiritual awakening that was like nothing I've ever felt in my life. I felt the presence of something more. And I knew in that moment that I was meant for more. And it's something that's very hard for me to describe. It's very hard for me to explain. But anybody that's underwent a spiritual initiation or a spiritual rebirth like that, it changes you on a fucking primordial level. Because it's like you reach into some part of your psyche and you realize you see for the first time, your eyes are open for the first time. And so from that point on, so right then, I made a little nick in my hand rather than lay my wrist open, and I swore a blood oath that I would not get high for 1 year. And I kept that, because it was hard. That first year was really hard. I really wanted to get high, but I was not going to break I had an experience with what felt to me like a higher being, a higher consciousness, and that it had called me to a purpose. And so to break an oath to myself, if I couldn't follow through with that oath, then I was a nidling, which means basically worthless in Norse, and I had no value, and I would never be anything. And that was what I kept telling myself: if you can't do this one thing, then you don't deserve anything else. And so I stuck with it, man. I kept my word, I kept my oath. And as I got about 6 months into that, I was detracted. I was detached back. So the same guys that I thought were my friends, that I was watching to run around and get high and chase the sack, and I was starting to look at them, and I was like, man, these dudes are fucking pathetic. And that used to be me. I was right there with them, like running around chasing my next high like a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? And so that detachment, of pulling back gave me the clarity that I was like, man, this is I'm never going back to that. And I haven't to this day. That was 15 years ago now. And so a huge part of that was I had to fill the void that, addicts, there's a void within us, and you have to fill it with something. And so I turned to fitness and discipline. Fitness became my altar, and discipline became my prayer. And that ability to just consume myself in lifting and in the transformation and in the growth was really what helped keep me clean and keep me focused and opened huge new doors for me. And I've just kept pushing that envelope. Once I got out, I became a professional fighter, went 4-1 in my MMA and bare knuckle career. And in that process also, I became very passionate about helping other people, about coaching. The coach archetype and the coach energy comes very naturally to me. I naturally want to coach people. I want to help people. I want to share my experience with people. It's hard for me to talk about this stuff. I used to never talk about this kind of stuff because I thought people would judge me, and I worried about what people would think. And now I just really don't give a fuck. If people want to close doors on me because I've been to prison and because I have this history, then good, fuck them. I really don't care at this stage in my life, because I've come back from all of that, and I've changed myself, and I've rebuilt myself, and I've helped many men, most of whom weren't struggling with prison and drug addiction, but being overweight and out of shit. It's the same feeling of like hopelessness and not knowing what to do and hating that part of yourself, and knowing that you could do more, that I felt when I was an addict, that I felt when I was at my darkest place. So I have made it my life's mission and my life's purpose to guide men from that spot and help them become the person they're supposed to become. As an example, one of my clients, Simon, we've worked together a couple years now. He came to me a couple years ago. He was almost 300 pounds. And, I liked him right off the bat. And I was like, okay, him and we got along really well. And I could tell that he was like just disgusted with where he'd let himself go. So, he used to be kind of, into HVAC, doing the physical side of things. As he'd grown through his career, he had been very reliable. So they'd promoted him up, and he ended up kind of like riding a desk in an office. So what manual labor used to keep him fit, manual labor used to keep him healthy. Once he got into there, as his career began to grow and his life and his family stabilized, his health was what paid for it, because he sat at a fucking office at a desk all day and didn't fucking work out. So he's about 300 pounds, and was just ashamed of it. Like, he would go to the beach and wouldn't want to take his shirt off. He couldn't keep up with his daughter. His knees hurt. And he knew that, he wasn't even 40 yet, and he was on a fucking slippery slope to what he didn't want to become. He didn't want to be that sick dad. He didn't want to be the dad that couldn't do anything with his daughter. He didn't want to be the husband that wasn't attractive to his wife and couldn't do anything for them and with them, because he was riven with fucking, sickness and everything else that comes downstream from this. So we got him on a good program. We got him working out 3 days a week. We got him on the meal plan. He lost 100 fucking pounds in a year and built 25 pounds of muscle according to his DEXA scans. Now he's doing jujitsu. He's like, they're hiking, they're hunting, they're camping. He feels fantastic. And it's like, he tells me all the time that, like, because joining your program and working with you, I'm a completely different person than I was. It changes you at a fundamental level. This is not just physical. We're training for excellence in everything. And Simon is like the epitome of that. So what are we training for? Because this, obviously, I am a fitness coach, and this podcast is mostly about transformation through fitness, although we're going to go into some of the other elements of it. So what the fuck are we training for? So there is a quote that I like, that's always resonated with me. And it goes something, I don't want to butcher it, but it goes something along the lines of, training is never just physical. We are training to excel at everything in life. The body is our vessel. We need to take care of the vessel, because if your body is weak and sick and diseased, then your spirit is weak and sick and diseased, and you cannot become who you were meant to become. I think this is something that modernity has kind of butchered, in the fact that we used to see it all as one cohesive whole. Mind, body, spirit was just one thing, right? Now it's all separate, and people can be really strong in one and not the other. That's not how it works. You need to be strong in both mind and body. The frail and the weak can never be truly spiritually fulfilled. So we're not chasing aesthetics. We're chasing power, real, primal, multi-dimensional power. So let me go through my 4 planes of true power. This is how I look at training, and these are some of the elements that we're going to break down in this podcast over time. Number 1, mental. We're going to build up mental resilience and fortitude. The ability to suffer without breaking. We are going to become unbreakable forces of nature, and we're going to build a mind that doesn't quit when things get hard, because things are gonna fucking get hard. This is something that so many people fail to realize. They do good while everything's going their way, and they have momentum and they have impetus, but the first thing that happens in their life, they lose somebody, they undergo something, and they fucking just crumble in on themselves. And we're not going to be that guy. That is not what a man is supposed to be, and we are not going to accept that. Number 2, physical. Your body is the vessel for your spirit. We just went over this. If it's weak, so are you in a spiritual way. You cannot be a complete person if you're frail of body or of mind. So we're going to train the body so it becomes a weapon, a tool of service and dominance for us. And so being physically fit, it has so many benefits aside from just health. It makes you more dominant. It makes you more confident. It makes people respect you. I'm going to be straight up with you. People don't respect a fat, sloppy sack of shit. They just don't, because it's a reflection of somebody who doesn't have fucking discipline and somebody you can't rely on. That might not be correct, but that is the perception that we have been evolved to see. Somebody that doesn't have enough discipline to keep themselves from getting morbidly obese, I inherently distrust initially, right? I try not to, but that's my initially, I'm skeptical of them. Now, maybe they can prove themselves in other ways to me, but why would you want to have to overcome that initial barrier with somebody? Whereas when you meet somebody who's strong and fit and vigorous and intelligent, you immediately are more inclined to trust them and believe you can rely on them, because if in nothing else, they've proven that they have enough discipline to eat the right food and go to the fucking gym and not turn into a fat sack of shit. So this is important, and that's harsh, but that's the fucking truth. So number 3, spiritual. Discipline is sacred. And the way that I see spirituality, it's very personal. Obviously, I am a Norse pagan. I don't give a shit what your religion is, how you practice, whatever. That's your business. But for me, Norse paganism, the walk of Odin has always called to me more than anything else ever has. The way of the warrior has always spoken to my heart. So I break spirituality down into a couple of elements. Number 1, you have ritual, and you have layers of ritual. You have your daily rituals that you do, rituals of protection, rituals of austerity, rituals of discipline and initiation, right? And so these initiatory points are points where a part of you dies and is reborn. And that is like the essence of, I believe, what spirituality does for us. We evolved to be very close with a tight and tribal knit of people, to have a very close inter-tribal honor set and honor code and ethos, and undergo a very specific set of initiations and ordeals and rites of passage through life, right? So obviously a lot of that's missing, but everything we do is still ritual oriented. We brush our teeth at the same time. We eat at the same time. We check the locks before we go to bed. All of these are rituals, because ritual speaks to us on a visceral level. So these are the small rituals, which then feed the big rituals, which for me are tied to the calendar. They're the solstices, the equinoxes. And so through this, you get layers and layers of experience, of tribal experience. If you have a tribe or a brotherhood or friends to share this with, or at least just layers of spiritual experience if you do it with yourself and your family. So we feed our soul through this rhythm of ritual, through this rhythm of hardship, of tribe. And we feed our soul in this way, not in chasing cheap dopamine. This is a much realer sense. Now, number 4, temporal. This is about means. This is about achieving power in the time, hence temporal, and age that you live in. So for us, that's money. That's financial freedom. If you're not financially free, you're a fucking slave. Like, that's it. You cannot help anybody else if you're not financially free, because you're so selfishly concerned about your own survival and how to pay your own bills and how to do everything else. So we want to pursue whatever it is that we're good at, and we want to find a way to make money on our own terms, and to provide value to the world, and to provide a service that is valuable to the world, that also provides a good income for us, so that we can do the things that we want to do. That's temporal strength. So how I look at strength and power in the temporal sense is, there is a Norse word called Megan, which is basically it's modern cognates are might, and even means come from the same. Mean comes from the same word. But it is your reservoir of spiritual energy and your ability to bend the world around you, spiritually and materially. It's like your reservoir, and you can pour into that by doing good deeds, by layering deeds, by doing the right thing, right action, by providing value, exchanging value with the world, by giving, by protecting, by taking care of your family, by by sticking to whatever code of ethics it is, and honoring it, and believe, and having a set of values, and having a set of virtues, and adhering to them, even when you don't want to, and even when it's fucking hard. You add to your Megan, and then you can just feel it when you're in the presence of somebody who has an energy to them. And it's like, this dude is indomitable. And it's because he has built up a well of energy around him through right action, through good deeds, that it basically the world, the universe bends around him. And that's what we're really trying to pursue with temporal power and Megan. So finally, obviously, this is a podcast that is definitely geared towards men and masculinity. So in this modern age, we need to talk about masculinity because masculinity is disappearing at an exponential rate. With every fucking generation, they get softer, they get weaker, and they get less masculine. So masculinity, and we have ridiculous terms like toxic masculinity and stupid shit like that. Masculinity is never toxic. It's untamed, right? Men evolved to be protectors and providers, to be warriors and wise men. There is an aggressive element to that was necessary to protect the tribe, to protect your women, to protect your children, to go out and hunt and provide, to be those warriors, to go and sacrifice your life for the people that you love. So there is an inherently aggressive and primordial force that exists only in men. Women have obviously an entirely different and just as powerful and just as beneficial aura and essence to them. But masculinity is raw power and aggression, which must, and I stress must, be tempered by reason and right action. So we have to take the archetypes of the warrior, and this is the hero's journey, where the hero is a fool, and then he goes and he faces his own death, and he faces his own demise, and he goes off on this hero's journey, and he's reborn as the wise king, right? So we have to undergo that. We have to blend the archetype of the warrior and the wise king, because you can't have one without the other. If you're just aggression and raw masculine power that is untempered and unbound, then you destroy everything around you, and you're not a good protector, and you're not a good provider, and you're not a reliable human being. So for me, I got to see this in prison up close. And in a lot of ways, prison is a truer reflection of the human psyche, right? Because we're not really bound by the social norms and codes of a really institutionalized government that keeps us very safe and has kind of removed all the elements of, at least on a day-to-day basis, physical danger from us. That physical danger still exists in prison, and it adheres to a very archaic code, an archaic code of strength, its own honor system, which is very, basically a reflection of older honor systems that you don't really see anymore in society. And so it's kind of a more pure reflection of the human psyche. And obviously prison is ruled by violence, and it's ruled by aggression, and it's ruled by dominance. It's ruled by not allowing yourself to become a victim, because if you ever show any shred of weakness, the predators, because it is full of predatory animals, will turn on you, and they will feed on that weakness, and they will destroy you. So it encourages you to become a strong individual. Now, the problem with that is a lot of guys go in, and they're young, and they have the aggression. They have that part down. Great. They're violent. They're aggressive. They have all these masculine virtues, but they never learn to temper it. And so they can never integrate into society, and they can never become anything more than just a worthless fucking idiot, because they've never learned how to temper their aggression and their masculinity. So it's like the story in Norse mythology that I like to revert to is that of the Fenris wolf, which was bound by Tyr, the one-handed bravest god of them all. And Fenris is like this insatiable, chaotic being that consumes and kills and destroys everything. And that exists in every man. And you need that, because when shit gets hard, you've got to be able to unleash the beast and to allow the wolf out into the world to drive you, right? We need that animalistic force, that rage, that wrath within us, but we have to bind it, just like they bound Fenris, because if you don't, it will consume you and it will destroy everyone you care about. And I believe that is the essence of masculinity. To recap, and a final word here, this podcast is for those who are ready to take back control. You can expect episodes on training and nutrition, spiritual warfare and discipline, business and money, initiation, masculinity, and the hero's journey. Nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. That is going to be the battle cry of this podcast. And let it be your weapon. Let suffering be your weapon and your own crucible to growth. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Like I said, this is just kind of to break down a little bit about what the podcast is about and a little bit what to expect. Again, we're going to go over training. We're going to go over nutrition. We are going to talk a lot about that, but we're also going to go into some deeper elements here. If you guys enjoy this, please like, subscribe, do that whole thing. We're trying to grow this. We're trying to get into the algorithms here. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm going to try to get out 1 to 2 episodes every week. And I appreciate the fuck out of you guys.